I have 9, 10, maybe 11 plants for you today. I've kind of lost track because they're all around me, so I'm not really sure what I'm going to show you. I'm just going to pick stuff at random and display it. They're all Anthuriums. They all look really good for the most part. A couple of blemishes here and there. Yeah, we're just doing an Anthurium thing. Hello plant fiends, it's Nick, your friendly neighborhood Proppist. I am here with a whole bunch of Anthuriums today, and I know it's been a minute since you last saw me. I appreciate the fact that you guys are still here. I took a little bit of a break, had a vacation, got sick for a while, got tied up with work. You know what it is, life, right? There's a few things that took a bit of a beating in the meantime, but most of it looks pretty good, so I'm pretty proud of myself. So I am back, and I have a whole pile of stuff to talk about, and things are looking pretty good. I have a ton of plants, so definitely no shortage of plants to show you. It's more like a shortage of time to record it. I got a lot of good stuff that's been growing in the meantime. I have a lot of other stuff that's coming. They all look great, and I think I'm pretty happy with the condition of my collection right now. A few kind of munched leaves here and there that have taken a bit of a beating, but today what we're going to talk about is stuff that has been doing well for me, let's say since Christmas-ish. I've got a few picked out here that look really good and I'm quite proud of, and a couple of really new ones that I think I'll show you as well. One I picked up right before I went on vacation, one I picked up right after I just got back. So good selection of stuff here. These are all plants that I've gotten within the last 2-3 months, except maybe 3 that I've had for quite a while longer, but still acquired in the last year. So maybe 4. I'm looking at you, Mark Vep. I mean, BVep, sorry, in joke for those who know. I thought I would spend some time going through a few of these guys. I'm going to tell you about what they've got going on in terms of new growth, in terms of what their soil / media currently in situation is, and what I've been doing to take care of them, or what I haven't been doing, because some of these have been doing just fine without my help, and what I plan on doing with them in the near future. And hopefully that'll help you. I'm no Anthurium expert. I have a ton of Anthuriums, but I still don't consider myself any kind of expert, and I still don't think I will for the next year or two, at least until I've had these growing, until they I want to get more really big ones. Right now, my strappy leaf Anthuriums are some of the ones I acquired in the last 2-3 years. Those ones are doing really well, but I've killed way more. Okay, maybe not way more, but I've killed as many Anthuriums as I have. I've killed that many at least. And if you're still waiting for that dead plants video, it's coming. I apologize for not releasing it first. I think this one's going to come up first. If I look like I'm having some sort of time delay going on, and I'm really brown here and not really brown there, it's because I went on vacation. It's a big video. You'll see. It's like an hour and a half long. It's killer, but it may come out after this one. So hopefully your patience will be rewarded. All right, so you can't see this, but I'm actually sitting in front of a table that has a bunch of heat mats on it. And I've been keeping a number of kind of transient plants that I purchased recently-ish, or just been too lazy to move somewhere else. They've been sitting here in a dome, which is currently not right here where it normally lives, or just kind of out in the open. You can see there's a few of these guys just kind of hanging out right here. Some of these plants are plants I'm going to show you today. Some of them are plants I'm just keeping transiently until I move them into their new home. New home being an Anthurium tent that I am setting up that, don't tell my wife it's coming, but she doesn't know about it yet. Surprise, another tent in the garage. Okay, so between you and me, right? On that note, I'm gonna pick a plant at random here. I'm not really sure. I have about 1, 2, 3. I clearly haven't counted well. I think that's going to catch up to me at some point when I'm old and gray and I'm wow, this dementia is really knocking in there right now. But right now, I think we're somewhere in the 10 range. At the end of the video, I'm going to tally it up, and then the thumbnail will reflect how many plants there actually were, because I don't know. We'll see. We'll figure it out.
15 minutes later.
I am back. It may look like I wasn't gone at all, but actually I was, because I was making my kids dinner, so things happen. One of those things you hear about on the YouTube self-help channels, creator help channels, for people who create on YouTube and want to do something with it, is that you should just be yourself. And I'm it's a hard thing to be yourself on camera. I kind of wonder about how much of this is me, how much of this is a persona that I'm putting on, but really I'm trying to project my normal self, the self that I am with my wife, my kids, my coworkers, my friends, etc. This is something that's difficult to do when you're staring at the lens of a camera, which I'm doing right now, and there's nobody else in the room. However, there are a bunch of plants in the room, so I'm going to treat these plants like my friends. And I'm going to say to myself, hey, you know what, guys? We're going to have a chat. So I may sound mildly crazy doing this, but that's what we're going to do. I think I'm going to start today with what can I start with? I feel like I want to start with the one that's staring me in the face. You can't see it. Maybe you can see the top of it. It's right over here, but this plant is a plant that I was looking for a really long time. This is a plant that is relatively rare, I think. I mean, as far as things go, like most things aren't really rare anymore. You can pretty much get what you want. But for Anthuriums, this one, I don't see a ton of them out there. And I mean, it's one of the things where I think it's not a velvet Anthurium, so it's not probably one of the more like sought after. It's a little like off the beaten path, I guess, but it's definitely one of the collectible ones out there. And I think if you know the breeder, J. Vanini, you might kind of guess at what it might be. There's a lot of big JV plants out there that are probably more popular than this one, but I spent some time talking about J. Vanini in one of my last videos. J. Vanini is one of those divisive figures. He is a gatekeeper / cult figure of the realm of tropical plants, but he's also something where you kind of aspire to have some of his plants. So who knows? Like, I've got a couple now, and I'm like, I'm not going to send them back. So, you know, I'm pretty happy with these guys. I'm going to show you. I hope the lighting is pretty good here. When we're putting the hand in the way, this is actually a pretty dark plant. But with light on, there you go. It's a little brighter. This is an Anthurium Curandero. The Curandero, this is the 1.0. He has a 2.0 as far as I remember. They are all slight variations on the theme. The Curandero 1.0, this is one of his, I want to say, kind of like trademarky kind of plants. Unfortunately, unlike the Panamama, which is another one of J. Vanini's well-known plants, this guy is a Curandero 1.0. I honestly don't know off the top of my head what the difference between the 1.0 and the 2.0 is. I think I went purely off of looks for this guy. If I can find the difference, I will tell you. I will post something below which explains the difference between these two. This is the one I thought looked nicer. It is not a velvet Anthurium. It is a shiny Anthurium. I think you can probably see that from the light reflecting off of this guy here. It's crazy, crazy shiny. And I think that is the appeal of this plant. Also, this thing grows like a beast. I'm going to try and include a picture that I have of this specific plant growing in Mark. Mark Krasny is a really well-known plant collector in Canada here. I think he acts as like an importer for J. Vanini through Anthurium Arthur, which you can find on Instagram, and I'll link as well. Mark is a very quiet dude, aside from the posts that he posts of amazing looking plants here and there. He also is a great person to buy from. If you want to purchase some of these plants, I would suggest you go and talk to him if you can get a hold of him. So this guy, SP Nov Aframachi X Fort Sherman is what I recall. So in that, to break that down, SP Nova is new species, Nova species. Aframachi means it's like affinity to Ramachi, which is a plant that I don't actually know off the top of my head. So if there's one around, I'm going to try and show you guys a screenshot. And then it's X Fort Sherman. The Fort Sherman is a very well-known pap that was developed quite a while ago. I think it's been around for 30 or 40 years, if not more than that. You'll see FS mentioned quite a lot when you're looking at Anthuriums in general. You'll see like Anthurium FSX something, and like FS is Fort Sherman. Fort Sherman is a military base, as far as I recall. I believe that's where it's named after. This is the newest leaf on my Curandero 1.0. Curandero is a Spanish word for medicine man. I believe that it's kind of more Mexican, Central American in specificity, but I could be wrong with that. All I know is I think it has to do with medicine men and kind of shaman types. I get it, like the vibe. It actually kind of gives me a bit of a voodoo vibe, which, you know, I know that J. Vanini has the voodoo child as one of his other plants, and like honestly, like this one gives me more of a voodoo vibe than the voodoo child does. I really, really like this plant. I'm looking forward to it getting big. It grows really well. I've had this for probably about 2.5, 3 months now. This leaf that you're looking at here, this one came after I acquired it. The other two leaves, this one here, and there's one that actually dropped off in the meantime. Those were all leaves that it came with. This plant is doing fine as far as I can tell. I think I'm going to take it out of this container. Probably move into something a little bit more breathable. I feel like this is a combination that it's currently in of pawn and tree fern, based off of my experiences with plants from Mark. We call them Mark plants because I think a lot of the Canadian, not only the Canadian YouTubers, but the Canadian Anthurium collectors in general have bought a lot of stuff from Mark over the years. Mark is very well known in circles in Canada because he's got the best stuff. In this case, I think specifically, I would say that I've got aerial roots growing. I'm going to kind of try and get it as close as I can without knocking stuff into the camera lens. But there is an aerial root coming down there. I can see it poking out. This plant is doing just fine. I am looking forward to being able to propagate this guy. I think Mark actually sent me a picture at one point of this thing in his bathroom growing in low light in his tiled bathroom. And it was like 3 feet tall and had leaves all over the place. So I am expecting this guy to do really well in my environment, whatever I decide to put it in. So, like I said, it's in a combination of tree fern and pawn, or tree fern and perlite. It's kind of hard to tell from the top of this because it's just white. I intend to move this guy into something else that's a bit more breathable, probably still including tree fern for the time being. There's holes in this container. It's not ideal. It's literally the container I got it in. I've had it in for probably close to 3 months now. It was definitely November, December that I got this guy. So, that's number 1. Let's move on to number 2. I think for this one, I'm going to go with a plant that you may or may not have seen before. It's not the most rare. It's definitely not super common, but it's easier to get than it used to be. The one that I've got is a butt cut. And if you don't know what a butt cut is, I mean, it's pretty much literally what it sounds like. It is the bottom of the plant chopped off. So you can see here, this plant has been cut right about here. This is just wood now. So, the plant below it in this case is an Anthurium pterodactyl. The pterodactyl is a Clarinervium X pedato radiatum. Pedato radiatum is this guy back here, which you can see this is my kind of baby pedato radiatum. I've repotted him. He's doing pretty good. I put him here for decoration purposes. He looks nice. He's one of my favorites because he's got such a unique shape. I'm really looking forward to growing him big. You can get him big. This is the latest leaf I just put up right after mid repotting. It's a little bit deformed, you can see there. The reason it's deformed is because I repotted it mid leaf growth. So fair enough, right? Like I think he's going to keep doing well. He's got 4 leaves. He's holding on to everything. So this guy is actually a descendant of that plant, not that specific plant, but of that species specifically. So this is a pterodactyl. Now, my question to you is, maybe not a question to you, question to myself, let's say. I don't know if this is actually a pterodactyl. I've seen pterodactyls that have kind of wings on the side. It's like a weird description for a plant, but it's got like the leaf and it's got a couple kind of bat wings growing out beneath here. I'll pull it back so you guys can see it. Like right about here, like kind of poking out on the sides. I'm not 100% convinced that this is the plant that I think it is, but it's definitely not a full Clarinervium, and I've seen plenty of pterodactyls that look like this. Now, this was a plant that I got for a reasonable price. So like I paid, I think, $30 Canadian for this, which is pretty cheap for a pretty good size plant, all things considered. I don't know. We'll see. All right. And you guys are probably like, hey, continuity error here. What's going on with that guy's hand? I'm like, yeah, I was in the middle of making dinner for my kids and sliced my finger. So sorry. This is the thing, trying to record with 3 kids in the house, multitasking, making dinner in the middle of it, and then coming back to filming, you end up with like wounds. Sorry. So getting back to the pterodactyl here, there's the dark version, and here's the with light. So the things are probably darker than they seem. This is actually a pretty dark plant. As I showed you back here, the pedato radiatum is one of my favorite plants. They call it the Anthurium fingers because it kind of looks like a hand with fingers on it. This guy, I've seen many variants of the pterodactyl. As far as I can tell, the Delta Force is also a Clarinervium pedato radiatum hybrid that I believe is just a specific one-off mutation of the original, or one of the original attempts of hybridizing these 2 plants. So interesting. The pterodactyl is a fun plant. I'm looking forward to seeing if I can get it to do the wing thing. I would really like it to do the wing thing. I'm hoping that it does. If it turns out the way I expect it to, I will show you a picture of what it looks like with the wings, just so you know what I'm talking about. I don't know if it's going to do that. I don't know that every variant does that. It could be that this guy is just a simpleton, sorry, who just can't manage it. We'll see. But I mean, he wasn't very expensive. I think the cheapest I've seen these guys go for is about 25 Canadian, and that was including shipping. I think I picked this up locally for 30 with no tax because it was a local sale and no shipping, so I think it was still a better deal. It's really well rooted. It's a big plant. There's a lot going on in there. I believe I could probably propagate this relatively quickly myself too. Honestly, I could probably propagate it right now just based off what I'm seeing from the stem there. There's growth points on a couple different sides. I could probably chop it up if I felt like it, but I don't really feel like it just yet. I'm just going to let it go. And it kind of looks like it has... Does it have a growth point? No. It's not actively growing just yet, but it's doing just fine. So, and it's a nice thick plant. It really has like the genes of the Curandero, like thickness and just being tough feeling, that really make it feel like it's going to do just fine in my care. So I'm not super worried about it. It's in an aeroid mix currently. It looks like kind of a barky standard aeroid mix of soil combined with orchid bark, perlite. I'm not sure what else is in there, but this is definitely not my style of combination. I would use something a bit more up my alley with semi-hydro. So I'll probably move this into pon at some point soon. And when I move into pon, I will take a look at how long this stem chonk is. I don't really know. It doesn't feel like there's a whole lot below it, honestly. Like I know when I bring in like an Ecuador plant or like something from Ecuador or something from Indonesia, that there's quite a bit to it a lot of the time. In this case, it feels like there's not. This is probably like a butt cut with not much to it below. It just feels a little wiggly, so I don't think there's a whole lot below there. So it probably is going to get repotted just as is without any chopping. I'll move it into semi-hydro pon, DIY pon. If you guys are curious, I will link the recipe below. It's on my website. It's down there. You can see the whole thing there. Don't know how this is going to do after a repot. These guys sometimes can be just fine after a repot into semi-hydro, and sometimes they can take a little while to acclimate. So we'll see. He's a tough looking plant. I think I'll probably wait till it puts out a leaf first before I repot it, just to be safe. So we'll see how it goes. Again, this is like a local pickup, nothing super special, but one of those plants where I've always wanted one of these, and I hope that I can turn it into something really fabulous when it grows nice and big. What are we going to look at next? Got a lot of plants here. I'm just kind of trying to organize these based on what I've talked to you about already and what I have not talked to you about yet. I think the next one is going to be this guy. This is one of my current favorite plants. This is an Anthurium magnificum X AOS Tazula dark form. So as much as he is a little floppy, you probably saw this on my Instagram. I posted this recently. I'm not sure about the lighting, whether or not it's kind of like showing how awesome this plant looks, but it does look quite spectacular. This leaf is still floppy. This is still an emergent leaf, which if you can believe that, this is already like easily, like it's as big as my hand. So it's like a good 7-8 inches at least. I want to say even more than that. Like it's at least 8 inches long, probably pushing 9 inches. This is a big ass leaf that's not finished growing yet. And like, look at the size of the previous leaves. This was actually the previous leaf. This munched one. This got munched a little bit by thrips, but mostly by me spraying for thrips. So I used Safer's End-All, which is not the greatest product, but it does the job. In Canada, we don't have access to Azamax and Bonide super easily, so I don't have any currently on hand. So I used the Safer's End-All on this guy, and the leaf was emerging at the time. And this is what happens to a leaf that emerges when you spray it with chemicals. And I did rinse it off, but I waited a good day before I rinsed it off because I knew there were thrips munching away at it. This is what happens. This was the original big leaf that came out after I had moved it out of tree fern. So like just looking here, so these three little leaves that are back here. So there's 1, 2, 3. These leaves were in a very small container. I think I actually showed you guys this plant in a previous video. This was my Anthurium seedlings repot video. It was very uncared for a very long time. So these leaves, these 3 small leaves, they were packed into a very small container for a very long time, and they were just smooshed in there and just trying to force their way out of the container. And like it literally was pushing the lid up of the container, so like air was getting in and potentially bugs. After that, the minute I've repotted it into this substrate, this is pon. I upsized the container pretty dramatically, obviously, because it was in like literally like a 1.5 by 1.5 at most before that. And it went into this kind of 3-inch-ish container. This is all DIY pon again with wicking. I've got 4 wicks, which is my standard now. It's actually 2 wicks inside. It's like 2 kind of U-shaped wicks that I run through the inside. This is what I typically do with anthuriums that are kind of like past the baby seedling stage and kind of into the I want to start sizing it up a little bit. As you can see, this works really well, and I think that like kind of upsize method that I've seen a lot of the YouTubers doing lately, that upsize method is working out really well for me too. I went from tiny container to pretty significantly upsized container. I'll show you the container here. I'm just going to pull it out so you can see what it looks like. This is like an orchid pot with only holes on the bottom. And you can see his roots already peeking out. I'm just going to zoom it in here. You guys can see there's a couple of roots kind of peeking out through there already, but all the holes in this container are on the bottom. And then it's inside of, I want to say this is a 16-ounce drink container. You can get these on Amazon. I'll link them in the description below. I use these. They fit perfectly for these kind of 3-inch-ish containers. It fits like it's made for it. And it's so easy to just pop them in and out. And like it holds quite a bit of a reservoir when you're using semi-hydro, which is really nice. So easy to clean, easy to pop it in there. You've got like almost half, at least 40% of the container is reservoir. You can run your wicking in there. It runs really well. And look, it's working really well too. Like I'm super happy with this outcome. Again, this is, I think I've moved this in about 2 months ago, and it's put out 3 leaves since moving. So 1, which was the original one, which looked fantastic. 2, which was the Thripsy leaf that got a little bit eaten and honestly damaged from the spray. And this guy, which is like double plus the size of the previous 2 leaves, and it's still floppy and still growing in. Like this is my head, this is the leaf. Okay, I think we're kind of side by side here. So it's almost head size already, and that's going from a pretty small leaf to begin with. So super happy with this, and it looks super cool. Let's take a look at that texture. Hopefully you guys can see that. It's still quite floppy. Anthurium leaves that are floppy, this still has room to grow. I'm still thinking this is going to get a bit bigger, but like look at that texture. And this was from Northern Plant Room. This is Somia. She has the greatest on earth Tizula dark form KOS. Go and check out her stuff. I've bought a number of plants from her that I'm super happy with. This is one of those that I've had this for a while, but like I said, this is one of those plants where it's like I took mediocre care of it for a pretty lengthy amount of time. Like since the summertime, I definitely could have taken better care of it. I moved it up and I took good better care of it. I think it was maybe late November, early December when I moved this over. And like I said, it's given me 3 leaves since then, and they've all been so much bigger than what they were before. And you can see from yourself, the roots on this thing are just going wild in here to the point where I'm like, this is probably upsizable again relatively quickly. I could probably move this into one of my bigger pots, like my larger pots here. I can probably move that up pretty soon. And I'm kind of wondering, maybe I should do a little bit more of a careful step up between pot sizes. I think some of these guys, when they're seedlings, I'm moving them straight to the bigger pots, and they definitely seem to do better when I move them to this intermediary pot size first. And yeah, just food for thought. We'll see how that goes. Again, this is one of my current favorites. I really love how the way this thing is sizing up. I mean, I know this leaf looks like jank, but still, honestly, like, even though it was destroyed coming out, it still came out well. And it's still photosynthesizing, so I'm going to leave it alone. And honestly, the previous leaf was really nice. And this next leaf that I popped out, this was just in a week while I was on vacation, looks spectacular. So super happy with this. And I wish you guys could see this like in person. It's such a nice leaf. So what do we have next for you? I am looking at a number of plants here. I know one of these I've shown to you recently. I think I'm going to go with this one. This is the Anthurium papillilaminum blue. Papillilaminum. It's hard to say that word. It's a difficult word. This is a big ass leaf. Honestly, this is like a 13, 14 inch leaf. It's significantly large. Like this is kind of parallel to my head, just for size reference. He looks a little worse for wear because he dried out, because he's still in the container I propagated him in. And this is going back quite a ways. This is my propagations video from September. Okay, I have not repotted it. It's still in tree fern with perlite. See that there? I'm super lazy. Also, he got attacked by the same thrips that ate a bunch of plants in my tent. So he had a bit of a rough go of it. The thrips have passed. So he's actually popping out. Yet another new leaf. This is, I think, new leaf number 4 because I think I took one off just for reference. He's a little wrinkly because he's still coming out here and because I think he got underwatered during my vacation. I'm hoping this leaf comes out okay because it just started popping while I was on vacation in Mexico and like came back and I watered it right before leaving and like it feels all right now, but like this is a big plant now with not much in terms of like space for roots or anything like that. So it's pretty root bound in here. Like there's a lot going on in here. I think you guys can probably see that there's a decent amount of roots across the board. Yeah, I need to repot this guy. I'm going to take it out of tree fern. This leaf is ridiculously big. Like I said, it's got some spots on it, so it's not the most attractive anymore. I think if you look at my Instagram, I'll show you a couple pictures of what it looked like kind of coming out and almost full grown. But, I mean, it's still solid. It's still doing pretty good. I think most of the damage actually is not from thrips. It's actually from underwatering. It's kind of spotty here. Like, I think this was primarily just from, like, not enough access to hydration. So this dude, he's curving a bit because he was pushing against something inside the tent, but I think this is going to be another big leaf because he's very small, very floppy, but the leaf is actually quite large already. Like, look at the size of my hand, and it's already like half the size of my hand. It's watered, it's hydrated. I'm definitely not touching it until this leaf is fully formed, and then I'll probably migrate it to pond into one of my larger pots like this guy here. 32 ouncer there. I think I'll move that. This is kind of currently in a 12 ounce, I want to say 12 ounce drink container, whatever you call it, just like a pop container, whatever. You can buy this on Amazon. You can buy them by the 100. This guy, he's doing great. He's way bigger than before I ended up propagating him in the first place. If you guys remember from my previous video, I'll link that up here. I was telling you how this was forced propagation, that the plant fell and snapped in half, and this was the top cut that was like an unintentional top cut. Well, clearly it's doing fine. I mean, yeah, it's had some issues from underwatering and potentially from thrips, but I mean, still putting on a new leaf. This leaf is looking really good. It's just forming, so I don't want to mess with it too much, but yeah, it's a nice leaf. So we'll see how that guy turns out. I'm going to pop that down here. Anthurium papillilaminum blue. That is an Indo import. I think it's from late fall. If I'm wrong, I will post a correction below just to clarify when it was actually from, but it's an Indo import from Rifaldi, who is our man on the ground in Indonesia. Feel free to hit him up because he is a fine purveyor of Indonesian plants. All right, I'm debating 2 different plants here. I'm not sure what I'm going to show you guys next. You know what I'm going to do is the guy that's sitting right next to me here because he's been staring at you all for quite a while. This is a BVEP. And if you guys are not familiar with the BVEP, now you're on camera, my friend. Oh, all right, if I look a little distracted, it's because I'm bouncing back and forth between kid dinner and like talking about plants. So this is a Mark Krasny plant. Again, I know we're using YouTube lighting. It's kind of like over saturating the light on the front. It's difficult to tell that it's actually quite dark. This is the darkest leaf on this guy, and this was the newest leaf. It popped right after it shipped here. I transplanted it into my DIY pond, and it has not given me a new leaf yet. I also propagated it right after I moved it into DIY pond, which is a bit of a problem. You know, like it was at the same time. I gave it a chop, gave it a bottom haircut, whatever that works out to. And so the bottom had, I guess, the majority of the roots. There were a decent amount of roots on the top, and you can see here, there's still roots in this guy here. He's been in this substrate now for at least a month. He's in open air, so he's a little crispy. I'm keeping him out here just because I'm keeping an eye on him. He's not in my tent because of the thrips outbreak in the tent, which impacted this guy, our papillilaminum blue. I didn't want to put my prized BVEP into the tent with the thrips. So he's been out here, but he's been in open air, so he's a little bit crispy on the ends here. You can see a teeny bit of crispiness going on. He did lose 1 leaf after transplanting, which was the smallest and oldest leaf, which I'm not particularly surprised by. Everything else looks really good, so I think he's doing just fine. He looks like he might be kind of pregnant. I'm waiting to see if it pops another leaf. There's potentially, like, I mean, the newest leaf is here. There's a couple of spots that look like they could give me a new leaf soon. So I'm kind of looking at that, thinking to myself, a new leaf is coming. So, Mark Krasny plant, yet again. This was not a JV plant, not a Vanini plant. This was just from Mark. This was a plant that he planned to use for breeding, and I lucked out and got this plant. He was using this, or planning to use this as a breeding mother, as far as I understand, and somebody who was going to buy it ghosted him, and I ended up swooping in and buying it shortly afterwards, so very happy I got it. Both ends of the plant, the butt cut, the butt cut, which lost a couple of leaves but is still looking quite healthy and still has all its roots, is growing, and I've promised it to somebody. And if you're watching, Mod, you know it's yours when you want it. I'm just waiting for it to pop another leaf just so I know it's okay. It's doing well, so I think this plant is doing just fine. I'm looking forward to seeing this size up a bit, and I'm going to move it into my Anthurium tent. I say Anthurium tent like I have one. I do have one. It's not assembled yet. I don't have an Anthurium tent. I have a grow tent. I have a Gorilla Grow tent, a 4x4 that is in my garage that I have to pay an exorbitant amount of money to heat in the winter just to keep it going because I can't afford to put it in the rest of my house. It takes too much space. So it's in my garage. I heat it like an idiot. I pay money in the winter to heat this tent. I also have an Anthurium tent that I haven't set up yet. Shh, don't tell my wife. It's still in boxes. It's a 2x4. It's not that big. It's big enough to hold my Anthuriums for the time being. Probably not big enough to hold them when they're full grown, but for now it'll do fine with all my seedlings. And I'm also going to gut my IKEA Millsbow that I currently have in the room over here, which I think I've showed you guys in the past. I'm going to gut that, and it's going to become my Anthurium seedling breeding ground, and that's going to be kind of one system. And I will have my slightly larger plants in the 2x4, and then I will figure out what the hell I'm going to do with the big plants afterwards, because I haven't gotten that far yet. So, BVEP for Mark. We call it the Mark VEP where I'm from. The Mark VEP looks really good. It's got the awesome BVEP butthole that you're all familiar with. If you're not familiar with it, there you go. Whoa, I'm back. Sorry for the interruption there. Life, as we call it in other places. You guys may have noticed my awesome, bright, fucking green Yeti mug. This is the best. I got this for Christmas. This is my favorite thing on earth currently. Okay, favorite thing besides my kids and wife. This is favorite, and dog, sorry. It's up there on the list of favorite things. This thing is awesome. Should I link this in the description? I mean, yeah, whatever. I will, but I love it. 30 ounce, 32 ounce. I love this thing. It keeps coffee warm for fucking ever, and it's the best. Anyways, it's decorative, and it's like so bright green. I'm going to use this for future videos. I love it. Keep it there. I have other plants you can probably kind of see. I don't know if you guys can see it. There's some plants over here. I don't know if you can see these guys. Ooh, he's a little off camera. Ooh, yeah, it's a paludiflorum. It's monstrous, my paludiflorum. I may or may not show that to you guys this time. I'm not sure. If you're enjoying this video, what are you waiting for? Just subscribe. The channel is free. It doesn't cost you a dime. I'm sitting here giving you info about plants. You'll get more. It's free. Go ahead. Shows your support. I'm here for you. Doing all this work, showing you guys plants, the least you could do is subscribe. This is my guilt trip. Do it. I'm going to get to whatever I can get to here. I'm picking through the plants I have here. And I think the next one I'm going to show you guys is, yeah, this guy. This is an Anthurium Pluton. This is the newest leaf, which is still hardening off, and this was kind of like a shipping leaf. It still looks pretty awesome, to be honest. I think like the texture you guys are seeing from the light sources that I currently have going on is probably doing it some justice. So this is not the biggest leaf on the plant. We're not quite there yet. It's definitely like working its way up. The latest leaf was probably this guy here. And I think the one before that, I'm guessing, was this one based off of the growth pattern. And then it's got a couple of like shipping-esque leaves from previous shipping down here. Let me give credit where credit is due. I got this plant probably, I think, about a month ago or so from Marnie, who is Passionate Plant Person on Instagram, and I will link her over here. She got this from a North Shore Tropicals live sale, and in turn, I believe this plant came from, what's his face? What the hell is his name? Spacehijau, who is a plant breeder, hybridizer, etc. Anthurium Pluton is one of his, I think he has Anthurium Pluton and Neptune. A couple of these guys, they're named after planets, planetesimals, former planet, dwarf planets. Not sure where the naming convention comes from, but I really do like this plant. I think when it looks big, like already this is starting to show some characteristics of the full grown leaf. You see like those ears? These are looking quite dramatic already, and this plant is not full grown. Yeah, I'm just going to show you guys the previous two leaves, like already nice big ears here. A little curly, but this is probably mostly from transit. This new leaf, like I said, came, it was like mid-growth during transit, so considering it's still a bit bronzy, I can show you guys on the back. This is a pretty bronze leaf. This leaf is not quite hardened off yet, and I think, it's got a bit of a tear in it. This is just, again, like I said, from transit. I can pretty much see through it. Ooh, look at that. It's probably got some room to grow still. I would think it's probably going to at least catch up to the other two big leaves that are on here. We shall see. But I'm pretty impressed with this plant. It's quite hardy. I feel like I could probably propagate this once I move it out of moss. It's currently in moss, but like you can see here, like the bottom leaf is quite far down. And I think that like I could probably chop this guy if I really felt like it. So the Anthurium Pluton, as far as I understand it, it's a papillilaminum X1 crossed with the pap dark form as the pollen parent. It's a good grower, I gotta say. Like, this is a pretty small container. This is like a 2-inch pot it's currently in right now. 2.5 inch max, and it's got like roots for days in here. It's pretty solidly rooted in here. This guy traveled super well. I ordered this out. It came from Eastern Canada. The irony of this is that I live 6 or 7 minutes drive away from North Shore Tropicals, where this plant was ordered from during one of their live sales. However, they haven't sold this in a bit, and I haven't seen any for sale in a bit, so I thought to myself, hey, let me try and find one. And so I found one, and it ended up being out east in Canada. I bought this from Ontario, and I shipped it over here, and I thought the price was reasonable, and this is an offset from the original plant that was ordered. So either way, it's doing really well. I might have a dried out new leaf. There's something coming here. Whether it's a pup or a new leaf, we'll see. The new leaf that is almost hardened off looks great, and it's definitely like a hardy grower. So, based off of my month plus of owning it and the fact that it traveled so well, I would give it a thumbs up for if you want to buy one. I'll let you know how it turns out big wise in terms of like, hey, let's get some big leaves. But this guy is not finished growing, and it already looks really nice. And I know it's got a hole and it's like a little bit wonky, but this gives me hope for this to be a really spectacular plant when it grows up. So Anthurium Pluton, we'll come back to this guy in like 2 or 3 months, and I'll show you what it's looking like then, and we'll see how it's done in the meantime after I've repotted it. I'm kind of looking behind me, and like Jim's having a bit of a hard day. I understand. Sorry, Jim. So let's take a look and see what we got else. I have a number of other plants to show you, and I'm kind of debating which one I'm going to show you next. You know what? I'm going to go with Yogi's plant here. All right, this one's from my buddy Yogi. This is a Bessier Black X BVAP. This is pretty cool. This is, okay, and this is like the latest full-size leaf it put out. This guy is not quite there yet. It has not finished growing yet. It's still not quite there. And this guy takes quite a while to size up. I think you can probably see the BVAP in here. I'm going to put it next to my BVAP that I've got sitting here already. You guys can see the BVAP comparison, right? They're definitely cousins. The ears are a little different. You can see the Bessier in there. And like here, the BVAP, it's got kind of almost overlapping ears above the sinus there. But that central sinus, there's definitely some similarity there. So moving our BVAP aside, this guy looks great. And this is the newest leaf. I've had this guy, I know it looks a little beat up. Okay, this has been in and out of high humidity, and I've had it in those Monty 7-inch seedling tray containers, and it's been trapped in there as kind of a big plant in a small space. Also, the lighting has been a little stretched, so we're getting a teensy bit leggy on this top leaf here where it's, ooh, wow, we're quite a bit taller than the previous leaf. I think it's probably antsy to get into some better light and better conditions, but this leaf here is the newest leaf. It's not quite as dark because it's not finished growing. It's quite floppy if I feel it just like that. It is a bit leggier, so I wouldn't be surprised if this leaf ends up being smaller or the same size as the previous leaf, which looks great. Look at that light on there. So this came from Anthuriums on Instagram. It is a cross of his Bessier Black. I'm going to show you a picture of up here if I can find one, hopefully, and a BVEP. And the BVEP, I think this BVEP was a BVEP round that he was using as the pollen parent. Off the tag here, it just says Bessier Black X BVEP. This thing is growing like a weed. Actually, putting this tag in is so hard because there's no room in the container. This is in a 2-inch pot, just like the Anthurium Pluton I just showed you guys. The roots, everything is coming out. This is clearly something I could propagate here. Take a look at that. Like, there is a lot of plant in this tiny container. I could definitely move this into something bigger, and I could definitely propagate it if I really wanted to right now. There's at least a couple spots I could chop at. There's growth below and above the root system that is currently peeking out here above the moss. So this is still in the container I purchased it in, just to be 100% transparent with you guys. I got this from my buddy Yogi. Yogi lives out in Nova Scotia and Halifax. He is a member of the plant group that I participate in here in Canada for Anthurium specifically. So I wanted to give him a shout out. My buddy Yogi's Instagram, I will link over here, is the green terracotta. So thank you, Yogi. And I wanted to show him the plant that is doing so well in my care. Haha, look at that. Doing great. East Coast is that way for you guys? Yeah, so he's out there. He's out in Halifax. It's a small plant community, I know. Hope things work out really well for him. And I hope he's able to sell more plants like this one because this one's fantastic. This one came, like I said, from Anthuriums on Instagram. Really, really, really happy with this plant. I think also I'm probably going to propagate and sell a chunk of this plant just to make up some of my costs a little bit because he wasn't cheap, to be honest. No shade on Yogi here. I know what he paid for this from Anthuriums, so this is just passing the book along to the next guy. Sorry. At the end of the day here, I think this is a fantastic plant. I'm super happy with it. I do think like it's very BVEP, and then this new leaf is kind of starting to look a bit more Bessier, which is interesting. I see BVEP, definitely. I mean, having a BVEP sitting here next to it, definitely see the BVEP. But I'm starting to see a bit more of the round, kind of reptilian nature of the Bessier and some of the neon veins in there. Starting to see that a bit more. We'll see. Once this leaf is fully grown, I'll give you guys a shot on Instagram. You guys can take a look at that and tell me how it looks compared. This next guy is a wacky one, to be honest. Ooh, wow, he's just barely hanging in there. I think this is one of the plants that I showed you guys in one of my earlier Anthurium seedling videos. And now I'm looking at it going like, whoa, he's like popping right out of the substrate and he's quite limp. You can see here, most of the stem is out of the substrate. I need to adjust this guy. He's not seated very well in here. However, he has been putting out pretty amazing leaves for me, and like they're all really wacky, wide, and not quite symmetrical, and it's really cool. And like it's got this like crazy kind of just doesn't look quite right thing to it. And I love that. Like it's super unique. So this is a papillilaminum hybrid X luxurians. This comes from Dustin, who is Bags Plants on Instagram. I have purchased a number of plants from Bags Plants. A lot of them are still very small, and I'm going to show you guys a little later once they're a bit bigger. Right now, I'm showing you kind of medium-sized plants here. We're keeping that trend today. These are all medium-sized plants, and I'm not showing you tiny seedlings. I'm not showing you any huge, gigantic plants. maybe except for one. But these guys are all kind of like in that same space here. And we're getting on to close to head-sized leaf already. And this is still in my 3-inch container. This is the same container that my Mag X Tazula Ace over here is in. And I'll just show you size-wise. Leaf size, like they're pretty similar. This guy, however, I don't really have a ton of information about, which is really cool. It's kind of like this mysterious plant. And I really do need to repot it, or at least adjust the potting, because it's actually thickened up above the substrate way more than it was below the substrate, which is interesting. So I'm going to see what I can do to move this guy down a bit. He is kind of sitting above where he should be right now, and I want him to sit a little bit more firmly inside this substrate. We're still kind of in this 3-inch pot in DIY Pond. Again, the roots look really good. Like, those are all nice. Again, the green is from the algae, so don't worry about that too much. But, like, we're well rooted in there and doing really nicely. And, like, look at the size of this leaf. This is still bronze. It's still floppy. You can still see light through it. Like, it's quite transparent. I'm flopping this thing around quite a bit. I'm like, I'm going to snap this thing. It's so bendy. But, like, it's really well rooted. This was the previous leaf. Give you a size difference here. Like, this was the previous leaf, and this just came out last month. So I got this leaf in January. This is February. This leaf popped while I was on vacation in Mexico. I came back and I had this. This was like half the size when I got home. 4 days later, we're almost a head size, getting there. And this looks fantastic. So unknown pap hybrid X luxurians. I love this thing. I love the fact that it's like, let's look at the veins on the back. Okay, look at how like completely asymmetrical that is. Like, stuff is going in every direction. At first I thought this was bugs. It might have been due to bugs, but this has been bug free and it's still doing it. So I think it's just a unique plant, honestly. You know what? The best part of this is that I have 2 of these. Like, I have this guy and I have another one. I'm a little worried because he's kind of floppy in here, but I am very, very happy with this plant just because it's such a cool plant. Like, you know, the luxurians hybrids just have the commonality between them. But the uniqueness of this guy is just that he's not symmetrical. I think almost every leaf it's put out has been a little bit wacky. Like, I look at this guy. This is one of the earlier leaves. Not quite there, right? Really one of the earlier leaves. Not quite there. And I've had this thing since it was a seed. Nothing is flat straight on this plant. I really don't know what's the reason for it. I think it definitely needs to be a little bit more stable. So I'm going to do something to stabilize it. I think I'm going to put a stake or something to hold it up a little bit more stable in here. Definitely move it down in the substrate because it feels like most of the stem is above the substrate. I just love this plant and I don't know what it is. It's just something about it. It's like, it's such a cool... I mean, every Anthurium you've got, like, a lot of them are just super symmetrical. I mean, look at this guy. Symmetry for the most part, right? This guy is just like all over the place, and I think it's so unique and interesting. And I find what's really cool about this is that it's sibling plant that I have, which is much smaller because I don't know, this one just took to the substrate a lot faster. Much smaller, yet it seems to have the same characteristics of being a little bit asymmetrical. So I think what I'll do is I'll probably sell the smaller one once it's gotten a little bit more growth under its belt. But this one is going to be one of my showpieces, I think. Love this one. So thank you, Dustin. A heads up, if you're interested, go check out his Instagram. It's Bags Plants. And he does sell quite a few plants for in Canada. Pretty easy to get a hold of those. He does sales at least once a month or so. And if you're in the US, I mean, ping one of your US importers from Canada. I'm sure you can get a beat on him, or at least ping Dustin on Instagram and you can find out some more about what he's got available.
5 minutes later.
All right, so break went by. I got a chopsticky thing. Dollar store, that's where these things are at. You can buy this from the dollar store, from like your local big box store. I've got the plant Velcro at the bottom there to hold it up. I didn't want to mess with it too much just to get it kind of going in the right direction. I'll adjust it after I repot it. For the time being, this will satisfy the plant gods and hopefully it will do fine. But like, again, look at this leaf. So nice. And like such a cool, it's so unique and so like weirdly shaped. It's very alien. I love it. I can't fuss over this plant anymore. I'm just too in love with it. And it's kind of a weird one because it's like a pap hybrid of unknown parentage. Dustin, whatever you did with this plant looks great. All right, let's get on to, what do I have next? All right, so this guy is, and it's not particularly big, but it's starting to put on a new leaf, which you can see right there in the middle. You see that guy right there in the center? There's a new leaf popping. Get a good little spritz here. Always with these Anthurium leaves, when they're popping out in room humidity, like I always give it a little bit of a spray, because with room humidity they typically dry out and the leaf can go to crap. So better to give it a little bit of moisture, just make sure it goes through. Maybe this angle's a little bit better. You guys can see there is a tiny leaf there in the middle. He's got the kind of like arcing swan thing going on of the new Anthurium leaf. But this is a Pat Voldemort X Woo 6. And if that means nothing to you, I don't blame you for it, because it's kind of hard to follow. So the Pat Voldemort is one of the papillilaminums from Woohoo Tropicals that they just kind of gave an initial name to. I'm going to show you what it looks like, the actual Voldemort parent by itself over here. It's got this very kind of evil looking pointed ears thing going on. It reminds you of Dracula, whatever else going on. I guess it reminds you of Voldemort. Sorry. Like, for those of us who didn't grow up with Harry Potter, because I was already grown up when Harry Potter came out, Voldemort to me is nothing, but like to the rest of you, I'm sure Voldemort has this kind of vibe that instills fear. To me, like, it's more of like an old school like Nosferatu, Dracula thing going on. And it's got the big ears, and this guy is the most similar I could find of the different options that I had from the children of the Voldemort. So this is a Voldemort X Woo 6. It's basically Pap X Pap. So it's a Pap Voldemort X Pap Woo 6. When we say Woo 6, we mean Woo 6 is like kind of the numbering system for Woohoo Tropicals, papillilaminum specifically. So in that case, it's the 6th Woo of their collection. Either way, the Pap Voldemort is definitely the prominent one here, and it's the mother plant. In this case, the Woo 6, I had the option of buying the Woo 1 or the Woo 6, if I remember correctly. And this is 2.5 months ago. I picked the Woo 6 hybrid because it looked nicer than the Woo 1 hybrid. I could go either way, honestly. Like, I wanted a Voldemort something. Honestly, at the end of the day, what I'd like is an actual Voldemort or a clone of the Voldemort, whether it's a self or a clone. I mean, I'd prefer to have a clone. It just looks super cool, and I think like it's doing super well in here. I can see it's got that new leaf coming out, so I'm happy. This leaf is come out since I transplanted it into Pawn. This is DIY Pawn as usual. I'm going to show you guys the label here, because if you don't believe me, that's what it says, and here it is. Woohoo Tropicals Est 2018 Texas, as far as I recall. I kept the tag for sentimentality because I'm that kind of guy. We'll see how this leaf turns out, but this has been sitting in open air. I'm going to move it eventually into a tent. It's an open air. Let's see how it does, but I'm pretty pumped about that one. That's one of my favorites. It's got this like super matte finish. You see here, I'm going to pull it up here. It's a little bit satin, a little bit matte, but like, it's when the leaves harden off, it's really dark matte, and it's a little bit bolate, but the veining is super dark, and it's one of those things where it's like, this is just a super sexy plant. I'm very, very pumped to see how it turns out when it's bigger. I'm hoping to grow that one big and do something with it afterwards. We're getting close. We're not quite there yet. There's still a couple plants to go, but we're getting close to the end. I'm kind of sensing, as I've been at this for a while, and like I've had dinner in the meantime, my kids have gone to bed, I'm still filming. I'm still here with you guys. Still got a couple plants I want to show you. I'm not going to show you everything. I have a whole pile of crap over here that I want to show you, but I think I've got one or two. Let me see. What can I show you guys? You know what? This one. Have I shown you guys this one? I think I have. It goes back a while. Not recently. This is... Ooh, look how long that is. This is my Anthurium pallidiflorum. And this is a beast. Like, this is the latest leaf it put out. Look at the length of this thing. We're closing on 3 foot here, I think. I showed you guys my Anthurium SP Morona in a previous video recently. ish. This is probably my second most favorite pendant Anthurium, and like, look at this. Like, look at this leaf. It's dark, it's velvety, and it's pretty much spotless. Okay, here's my arm, just for comparison's sake. I'm gonna take the newest leaf on here. I'm gonna show you guys my arm in comparison. Here we go. So we're like past elbow, and we're into like, okay, forearm territory now. Just the leaf blade itself is probably pushing 25, 26 inches at least. And I have done nothing for this plant. When people tell you that some Anthuriums are hard to care for, like the Pallidiflorum for me, all it wants is like to be watered. It wants to have a dense, kind of condensed root system where it continues to live, and then it dries out. You know, I dried this out between waterings, which is probably not normal for a lot of Anthuriums, but I dry this out probably not by intent, but it definitely happens. It's got a few dried arrow roots. You can see that there's one dried out a little bit here. But this plant has been, I mean, I've got how many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6 nice big leaves on here. This is a wonderful plant. It requires so little care, and it's so nice. I mean, look at this. So, I mean, I hope you guys are getting like the same vibe that I'm getting off this thing. Just looking at it close up, it's so cool. It's like super, like micro velvet. Like, I don't know what you would describe it as, but it's definitely more dense of a velvet, kind of not satin, but definitely like a dense velvet microfiber almost, compared to what you get on some of the larger velvet Anthuriums, like the ones I showed you earlier. Super nice. The vein down the middle is first class, and it's actually almost like, it's almost bolate on the reverse side. Like you've got like bubbles kind of coming down the middle of it. It's such a cool plant, and it requires so little care. I bought this plant from an import. I want to say it's early to mid 2021. I can fact check myself. I will put that down below. I love this plant. It has been so low maintenance for me. So low maintenance. It sits in like a wire metal shelf on my IKEA shelving unit. I think it's an Omar shelving unit. It sits in a wire shelf hooked onto that, and it requires so little maintenance. I water it once a month. That's it. Like, I'm not even joking. Like, I fill the bottom container here. Like, I like to bottom water these guys. I fill this to the top once a month. That's it. It soaks into the sphagnum moss. I don't touch it again. I mean, the most frequent I ever water it is every 2 weeks, and like realistically it's once a month because I'm lazy and I forget most of the time. So that's all it takes. It's a great plant. I picked that up. I don't think it came through Ecogenera. I think it came through an earlier import before Ecogenera carried these plants. And I say this because I know Ecogenera started carrying the Pallidiflorum like after I obtained this plant. So this guy came in earlier, and I definitely paid a premium for it back in the day. You can get these for cheap now. I want to say like $35, $40 maximum for one of these plants. Maybe you can get it for around that price. I might be off by $10 either way, but it's a great plant. And I think if you want to hang it in something, it's a great like down grower. You can see like just based on how it's not vining so much as just growing down the stem here. And it just likes to hang. And as a hanging grower, it's a pendant Anthurium. It just loves this. And like you can see it's sizing up for me. Like look at the size of these leaves, right? This is the size of the latest leaf. And I think this was the previously biggest leaf. It's been sizing up by a good solid 3-4 inches per leaf every time. And it definitely lost a leaf due to drying out recently. So this is not everything that you're seeing here, but this thing has been doing so well for me. And I've done so little to take care of it. I have it kind of stacked up here just for demonstration purposes, but I will show you what it looks like in my tent over here. You guys can see how it sits normally. I just water it when I remember. I go into the tent, I give it just again the bottom cup of water, and that's it. And it sits there for weeks on end, and that's all it survives on. It pops out a new big ass leaf for me every time, and I can't complain. It's a great plant. So highly recommended the Anthurium pallidiflorum. It has flowered for me a couple of times. This was at a point where I was not ready to do anything with the flowers. And I think I may have showed you guys in a previous video that I wasn't sure whether it was a flower or a new leaf coming out at the time, because I hadn't dealt with it on a pendant anthurium like this before. And in this case, there were 2 flowers that came out, one sequentially after the other. I ended up cutting both of those flowers off, but I let them kind of fizzle out in the process. And I think I'm going to wait until it gets a little bit more mature, and then I'm going to take that pollen and do something with it. So we'll see. I've got a couple other plants I could potentially crossbreed it with. Maybe my SP Morona, maybe something else. We'll see. I mean, anthuriums tend to breed from the same section. Not sure if that's a standard across the board, because I know people have said that you can breed cross-section. It's just really hard, and it's not always going to take. And like, it's kind of one of those things where it's like a high risk, high reward type of scenario. We'll see. I don't know that it's going to work or not. We'll see what I have to try it with at the time. I had a Lux that was flowering for a while. Maybe that one in the future. We'll see. I highly doubt it'll crossbreed of the Lux, but I'm sure with like a Vitarifolium or something like that, it might be more in line. So, moving on, I think we're getting on to our last plant here. I'm not sure which I'm going to show you guys next. I'm tempted to show you a couple different plants. Okay, I'm going to show you guys, just for the sake of it, this is my Anthurium King of Spades, and I'm pretty sure I showed this to you guys before I repotted it. This was still in moss at the time, and it has aborted a leaf in the meantime, and now it is just putting out a new leaf. And you can see right there, it's just starting to pop. I've been spraying this bastard just to make sure it stays humid. It was just a horn for a while. You know what they call the Anthurium horn? It's just poking out there. I've been spraying this guy in hope that it's going to give me a new leaf. This thing has been sitting on these 2 leaves, and this kind of half dried out leaf I've showed you before, that was months ago. This is the most slow moving Anthurium I've ever seen. It is dramatically slower than everything else I own. Like, dramatically means like you get a leaf a month or a leaf every 3 weeks. On some of the other guys, you get a leaf every 3 to 6 months if you're lucky on this guy. And I'm patiently looking forward to this guy to pop. You can tell he's just about to pop out of there. He's just so close. We'll see. I'm looking forward to seeing how this works out. But I've been spraying it religiously every day or two. Give it a little spritz. Make sure it's got enough hydration. Do it again, because I'm super paranoid now. And just wait. So this King of Spades, or Anthurium HU Haji Uli, whatever you want to call it, there's many names for it. It's a slow grower. So if you are in the market for fast growing anthuriums, don't buy this one. If you're in the market for cool anthuriums, then definitely give this one a try. This is definitely a fantastic looking anthurium. I love the leaf texture. It's very satisfying. I don't know what else to say. It's not satin, it's not velvet, it's somewhere in between. And it doesn't have a ton of texture, but it's just like, it's so thick, and it's very, very, very satisfying to touch. And it's a very solid feeling plant for such a small plant. This was barely past seedling stage. And I have it in Leca at the bottom, and I have it in Pawn at the top. It's DIY Pawn again. My usual wicking system here. This guy was moved into this about 4 weeks ago, I want to say. It's been in poor conditions. Poor top of a cabinet, low light, like an LED light, open air, nothing special. It's been treated poorly. I definitely was planning on treating this better. And I was just hoping it would tough it out. And it did. It's toughed it out for me. This leaf still looks great. It's putting out a new leaf now. After this came out, definitely after I moved it into the new substrate. And like I said, I put the Leca at the bottom here. This is primarily just because a pawn is a pain in the ass and it's expensive, etc. Even the DIY pawn, I don't want to waste too much of it. So I do a layer of about an inch or so of Leca at the bottom. And that's just easier to put in there with the wicking, etc. And then I start putting the pawn. I do about 80% above is pawn. And that's the DIY pawn, which I will link in the description again. And then you can see there's some wicking sticking through there. Now this guy has a ton of roots, You can't really see it super well. You know what? Let me just take it out of the container. Maybe it'll be a little more easy to see. I know this guy is super well rooted. Roots all over here. I'm trying to get a little closer so you guys can see it. Lots of roots in here. They're all doing well in the substrate. And I'm very, very happy with it. It's one of those plants where I'm looking forward to this getting really, really big. I'm not keeping it in the greatest conditions. Like I said, it's an open air here. But once this leaf pops, and once I've cleared out my grow tent situation so I can put my nicer anthuriums in there without a worry of them getting bugs, at least not getting the bugs that I currently have, then this guy's going to move in there and he's going to be one of my star pupils, I'm sure. Final plant we're going to do today. I don't know where we're at count wise. I'm going to count this up at the end. Last plant, this is going to be one that I just literally picked up today. This is an Anthurium X1 and this is a new leaf that is just starting to harden off. I don't want to mess with it too much. Anthurium papillilaminum X1. This is an Indo, just like the King of Spades I showed you guys before. And just like the Pluton, which is over here, size comparison beside it, the Pluton, new leaf, which is a little small, bigger leaves over here. So this guy is the X1. I'll give you guys a little bit of a close-up. Yeah, he looks quite light as far as things go today. Looking a little light, but I think this is not a matter of being chlorotic or anything. I picked this up from North Shore Tropicals. This is an Indonesian import. Again, I am not entirely sure where it came from. It's growing in a couple of funky directions here. It looks like the light's been facing it this way, so it's got one kind of perking up that way and a new leaf coming in over here. Now, the X1 is an Indonesian clone. I think it's of unknown origin. As far as I can tell, it's like one of those exceptional clones that popped up back in the day. I don't know that it actually has any specific history that anyone knows about. I think it's been around for a while. I got this tag all printed out here. Pap X1. See that? I'm going to put that on the label here so I don't lose it. It's an exceptional clone. I'm going to show you guys a picture up here of what it looks like big because it's quite spectacular. So I'm hoping to use this guy as like breeding stock down the line. So I don't think you can actually have too many papillilaminums because honestly there's so many variances and differences and so much uniqueness amongst all the Anthurium pappies that are out there. Like they're all super different. I mean, like this is a Pap Blue. This is a Pap X1. I mean, like, they're all Pappies, like, floating around here. This Pluton is, as far as I know, a Pap X as well. I think half the plants I showed you today are papillilaminum crosses. So, you know, these are all really interesting plants. There's a lot going on here. This guy's like in a combination of, like, cocoa husk, perlite, and kind of your typical aeroid mix at the same time here. This is not what I usually work with, but I'm going to transplant this. It should be chunky and airy enough that I can move this without too much trouble, but it's just not a huge plant. I mean, you can look at the top of the stem here. Like, there's not a huge amount going on. And, like, there's not a ton of roots. I can see some roots poking through here, so I think we're okay. But I know from what Lauren told me at North Shore Tropicals that this guy has been 80+% humidity. So I plan on putting this into probably an enclosed container in my tent. Like I said, I just got this today. So this is new to me, new to you. I'm going to put that into my tent in an enclosed container, keep it in isolation for at least a week or two. Give it probably a good spray down just to be safe, because anytime I'm getting anything from a plant store, I typically would just spray down because you never know what you're going to get from there. Give it a spray down. I'll move it into a storage container and then I'm going to leave it there for a bit. So I'm going to put it in that container, probably inside of my tent in a box. I'm just getting kind of light filtered through the container. Potentially sit on a heat mat. We'll see. And then once it's been isolated for a couple weeks like that, I will take it out and I will gradually acclimate it to the rest of my plants. So I don't know what that added up to. I can tell you that was probably 10 plants. Maybe I'm off by one or more here or there. I hope you guys learned something new. I hope you guys got inspired to buy another plant. Go get another plant. Go find another plant and show me your plant, because I want to see you guys in the comments Tell me about the plants you've got. If you have any of the plants we talked about today, let's hear your experience with them down in the comments. I'd love to hear about that. Love to hear what you have to say about it. Love to hear what your experiences are like. Please do give me your feedback. What do you think? I have a couple of videos in the hopper. I have, like I said, the dead plant thing is coming. I'm gonna get that one out to you very soon. I have another couple of videos on Anthurium wish lists. Some of the plants that I showed you here today were on my wish list. The Pluton, this was definitely on my wish list. And the X1 was on there too, so I can scratch those guys off. However, the rest of the wish list, and basically between what I've acquired recently and what's coming in the future, I'll include that. And then I've got a lot of other stuff to show you guys too. I've got my Syngoniums, my Monstera, my Philodendrons, my Alocasias. I have a ton of Alocasias and I have a bunch of new Alocasias. So I think I will show you guys some new Alocasias very soon. Those new Alocasias, those are kind of burning a hole in my pocket. I'm going to show you guys the new Alocasias pretty soon. I have so many different things I can show you guys. I'm not sure what to show you next. So if you have suggestions or ideas or thoughts, post those in the comments below. Send those to me at the Proppist on Instagram or here. I will answer anybody who asks me a question. Go for it. If you want to do a Q&A, I can do one of those too. I am maybe not as expert as some of the folks who are on here on YouTube, but I'll do my best. Thanks again for being here. I appreciate your time. Thank you for subscribing. If you haven't subscribed, this is your last chance. Last chance, I promise you. Last chance. Again, I'm Nick from the Proppist, and I will see you in the next one.